Good morning YouTube! Here's a video especially for you. If you are an Elan owner, you have been plating some of your parts using that acid zinc process that we described in the earlier video. You own a turbocharged car and you want to zinc plate this turbo heat shield off your car. Now I realise that may not be many of you and I may be delivering this video to a completely empty auditorium, but if those four conditions do apply to you, then watch on, because I have found plating this thing to be harder than the erection I get while watching Jodie Kidd on the classic car show. My wife and kids behind the camera really appreciated that joke. The problems with plating this are twofold. Firstly is just the size and the shape of it. It's about 1,000 square centimetres in area, and that means that normally you'd expect to use a plating current of about 15 amps to get a 25 micron thickness of plate in about 70 minutes. However, it just won't stand anything like that sort of current just because of the shape of it. The problem is that this convex outside, particularly the parts of the outside that are facing the anodes, they just get far too much current, so they're burning all the time. Meanwhile, the concave inside, you can't really get any current into there at all, so that hardly plates at all. And this is what burning looks like so that you know how to recognise it. Now this is just a bit of scrap steel plate which I've deliberately burnt the end of here by plating it at far too high a current so that you know what the symptoms are. So this is what bright zinc plating should look like. I've burnt this end by plating this at probably 5 times the current it really should have had. And you see you get these really ugly looking, dark, dull grey deposits. Often the deposit is streaked, you can see the current lines running through the plate. And it's also often very rough, coarse to the touch, feels like a Brillo pad, and it's also often very soft. If you rub it, you see it just comes off on your fingers there. So that's burning, and that's just caused by too much current. If it's all over the part, you've just got too much current flowing through it. So check your surface area calculations and change the current. If it's localised, you're just getting some parts burning but not others. That's current density. It's just that those parts that are burnt are receiving more than they should, more than their fair share of the current. The bigger problem though is that this seems to be made out of some high carbon, high strength steel. Now that's good because it gives a bit of corrosion protection, but it makes it a right nuisance to try and zinc plate it. The problem is that when we're baking this after plating it, the carbon steel is degassing. There's hydrogen gas coming off it, and that gas is blistering the plate, it's lifting the plate straight away. Now usually adhesion and blistering problems like we just saw there are caused by poor cleanliness. So if you've got blistering, the first thing to check is whether the part's clean enough when it's going in the bath. However, with that heat shield, it's scrupulously chemically clean when it's going in the bath. The blistering there is being caused by this hydrogen gas being given off, and that's being caused by a combination of the current density being too high locally and also just the metallurgy of this high carbon, high tensile steel that it's made out of. Now, just a word of caution here, don't try and electroplate high carbon, high tensile steels that are being used in structural applications. It's fine for this heat shield because that's just a cosmetic part that happens to be made out of high carbon steel. But for high tensile structural steels, don't try and electroplate them. And the reason you don't want to electroplate those is that that hydrogen gas that's being given off, that we saw that's causing our blistering problem, that will cause hydrogen embrittlement of the part and weakening of it. Now, generally speaking, that's not a problem on your Elan. That's not something you need to worry about for the Elan, because all of things like your suspension components, your wishbones and so on, they're just made out of regular low alloy steels which are fine to electroplate. Don't worry about that. The one place where you might want to avoid electroplating is some of the high tensile fasteners that hold some of your suspension components and some of your chassis components together. I wouldn't try and electroplate those unless you know a little bit more about the metallurgy of them and you know what you're doing. You're fine to plate the mild steel nuts and bolts that hold everything together, but don't plate the high tensile ones. The high tensile ones are fairly easy to spot though, because they're the ones that don't go rusty. Typically they're a sort of dark grey or blackish colour, and they'll be a lot less rusty than the mild steel ones. So that's fine, plate the mild steel ones if you want to, but leave the high tensile ones alone. Because they don't go rusty, they don't really need plating anyway. If you're having problems with burning and high or uneven current densities, then here's a couple of things to try that might help you out. Firstly, anode area. Make sure that you have at least as much anode area, and preferably twice as much anode area as the thing that you're trying to plate, and space those anodes out around the tank so that you're getting as even a coverage as possible. The other thing to do is move the part in the bath every 10 minutes or so while it's plating, so you're getting as even a coverage as possible, and also try and position the parts that are difficult to plate, that you're having trouble getting any plate onto, as close to the anodes as possible and facing the anodes if possible.
At high currents and high current densities, agitation becomes really important, so really try and get the bath turning over as much as possible. That will help to even out the current density. But the other thing you can try, if none of those things are really working, are techniques like shielding the high current density area, putting plastic shields in just to try and limit the amount of current getting to the high current density areas. That may work. Something else you can try is what's called bipolar anodes. Now, they are just pieces of metal, not connected to anything, that are put in the tank, and they are left sort of facing the parts that are proving difficult to plate. Now, the idea with those is that those bits of metal act as focuses. They focus the current and sort of direct it towards the bits that are struggling to receive enough current on their own. To be honest, I've found them pretty hit or miss, to be honest. I think when you're amateur platers like us, I've found it's more sort of luck than judgment if they work. But you know, if you're really struggling, then that's one thing to try. Finally though, you may just find that none of that stuff works, and the only thing you can do then is drop the current and increase the plating time. And that's just a linear relationship. If you halve the current, you need to double the plating time to get the same thickness. If you go for a quarter of the current, then you'll need to quadruple the plating time to get the same thickness. Well, there you go. In the end, it took 6 attempts, but we did finally manage to get it to plate. We've got a nice, reasonably even coating of plating all over, which more importantly hasn't come off when we've baked it in the bath at the end. I had to drop the current right down. In the end, I plated that at just 2 amps for 4 hours for a total plate thickness of around about 12.5 microns. And that's the highest current that part would stand without burning or blistering afterwards. Now, that's about 0.015 amps per square inch, which is about 1/7 of the current that you would normally use for an acid zinc plating bath. But anyway, I'm glad to say it's done now, so let's just get it polished up and then we're going to clear blue passivate it, get it back on the car and see how it looks.
How does it look? How does it look? I'll tell you how good it looks. Better than Jodie Kidd draped naked over the bonnet of a Ferrari Dino. That's how good it looks. Do you think I need to get professional help about this Jodie Kidd thing?